When American golfers go to Great Britain and Ireland, they often think, why can't it be this way back home? Specifically, why can't we have more private golf clubs that accept public play? Real clubs with strong local memberships that also welcome visitors on a daily basis. There are a number of reasons that this kind of golf club is rare in the US, some tax-related, some having to do with history and culture. But the good news is that it is possible to create a golf club in the US that roughly replicates the UK model. And right now in Michigan, a group of people is trying to do just that. The architect behind this project is my guest today, Mike DeVries. Mike is a decorated golf architect and a partner with the firm Clayton, DeVries Pont. His solo designs include Kingsley Club, Greywalls, and Diamond Springs, all in his home state of Michigan, as well as Cape Wickham in Tasmania. And in this episode, I'm talking with Mike about the effort to bring the UK club model to the US by turning Dunham Hills Golf Club into Proving Ground Golf Club. I'm Garrett Morrison, and this is Designing Golf. So, Mike, mainly what I wanted to speak with you about today is a project that you're involved in Michigan. This project is in its very early stages. It involves reimagining Dunham Hills Golf Club in the town of Heartland, Michigan, reimagining that facility as Proving Ground Golf Club, which, if the project happens, would be a very different kind of club. So could you give me the backstory of all this? Start me at the beginning and take me through kind of what has gotten you to this point in this venture.
Sure. So, Ben Cowan, young man, I'm 40-ish. I'll just say young man. I'm old. But he's been in the golf business in the past. He's a father of two young daughters, and he's been enamored with golf for a long time, and has always thought, hey, why can't we have a place that's can have a private club aspect to it, as well as provide open tee times for the public. And so it's that UK model, Australian model, where it's accessible to other people that want to get there and play, but the focus is really on sort of taking care of the members, or as Ben wants to call them, patrons. So they're sort of patroning the golf club, and they look after it. They provide sort of the base support, and then new members either come and go, but also you bring in the opportunity to have outside play at certain times of the day, and that's controlled and stuff. So you have a really nice environment, just like you would in the UK, where you have a great course. You have this camaraderie that you would have with your buddies that you play with and stuff, but it's a welcoming place to bring people in from the outside. So, and he's had this idea for a while, and we've looked at other sites and things like that in the past. I got to know Ben, met him 10, 15 years ago, a long time ago, and he was involved with the Walking Golfers Society. Not that he's anti-cart, he just, there's people out there that want to walk, and that's a way that you experience the game also. And I'm a big proponent of that also. You get a different sense of a golf course when you're on 2 feet and there's 4 people walking down the fairway, and and this, we both hit it to the right side of the hole, and we kind of walk together and talk, and the next hole, we're on the left side with somebody else or whatever, and you get a sense of sort of the social aspect of the game. And I think that's an element that we don't really talk about sometimes, that's a little bit lost in sort of the shuffle of all the excitement of golf and things. And so Ben's idea was really to bring this in. And so he identified Dunham Hills, which is about 50, 60 years old. This has been a course in Southeast Michigan, which is anybody that knows the roads. If you're in Detroit, the very southeast portion, Ann Arbor's a little west of that and a little south of that. US 23 goes north-south essentially out of Ann Arbor. And out of Detroit, I-96 goes towards Lansing. Those intersect at the town of Brighton, just north of Ann Arbor a little bit. And then a little bit north of that, M59 goes over to Pontiac. And so that's sort of there's east of M23 are some rural communities, but still then some city centers and smaller towns and stuff like that are sort of outskirts suburbia for Detroit. Some people might actually commute down to the city, but you're not really very far, and the golf course is only about 10 minutes from that intersection, which is a major thoroughfare for anybody that's coming up to Michigan from southern Michigan, from Ann Arbor, or say Ohio, coming up and going further north to northern Michigan for summer vacation or a cottage or something like that. So it's a really interesting location in that it's within this town or village of Heartland, and the golf team has been playing. The high school golf team has been playing there, the women's and the men's, for at least 50 years probably. And the two coaches are involved with Ben as as part owners and involved in building this sort of contingent that is really involved in wanting to transform the golf course into something a bit more, because it really hasn't had it has old irrigation and an old maintenance building, and there's a clubhouse that they built about 25 years ago, and they're doing some upgrades to that. But it's a really good piece of property. It has a lot of mature oaks on it, some wetlands. It's bordered on a couple of different sides by basically farmland. There's some development kind of filtered off to the side of one of the holes. But it's really, it has a kind of country setting to it. And the ground is really excellent. It's good soils. The routing is not bad, but we're going to make some alterations to that ultimately. So the idea is they're up and running now, operating as they did in the past as a public golf course. And we're doing some things like some tree management and things like that now that we know we're going to need to do in the future, and just help the golf course get the turf grass up to snuff, and then they'll go on a money raise to do the full thing, which would be full new irrigation. There's a few hole changes that we're doing, routings and stuff like that, and we'll rebuild greens and tees and get some changes, but we'll be using most of the corridors that are on the golf course currently. So a lot of things will feel similar, but it will play differently, and the routing will be a little bit adjusted to, 4 or 5 holes are really a little bit different alignment, there's a par 5, the 12th, the current 12th, that's going to get broken up into a short 4 and a par 3. And that's going to help to sort of weave things together a little bit.
So I want to get into the club model story a little bit later, but first, maybe a few more details on the architectural project here. First of all, what needs to happen in order for this redesign project to go through?
Money. It's always about money.
It's always it's a common answer to these questions.
You got a couple bucks here. So, that's always a factor. It's affordable golf, and the idea is that it should still continue to be affordable golf, but still you're putting in irrigation. Irrigation now is a very expensive proposition.
Yeah, since COVID, irrigation contractors, irrigation materials have just gone through the roof, and that's a major story in golf course construction that not a lot of people know about, but it's having a huge effect on what people can do.
Yeah, major budgets, all that sort of stuff. So the thing is that's an incredible amount of disruption. We also want to change a few hole alignments and stuff like that. So that involves either in some situations, cutting some trees here or doing earthwork there. So really sculpting a brand new green, not on the same green area where the soil might be halfway decent, but then consistency with trying to build the same thing. So we'll import greens mix and things like that. All that comes with a cost, but long term, that's going to make it much more viable for basically the long term life of the golf course. There's an old maintenance building that really need a new maintenance building, and so we've identified a location where we can build a new maintenance barn, and that's not going to affect the golf course. It's going to be better, and the current maintenance barn can be taken out because we can realign the entrance to the club, which would be a better, more appropriate entrance to the club, and will help the practice area also. So some of those types of things they're just needed improvements, and those come at a cost. So I think we can do irrigation. This is not the desert where it's 110 degrees and you have to, if you don't have water going on it, it's going to die. It's just going to be dirt. This is a moderate temperate climate, but you still need to have irrigation. So I think there's ways that we can do that effectively and economically, and that's going to be, important. So I think if we can do that, I think that's going to be really, really helpful. And then it's essentially kind of an existing site, but we're really building a new golf course. Think of it that way. So because there's certain areas that are going to get disturbed, even though the turf is improving and getting better where it is now, we're going to be overseeding that or stripping that and then putting down new seed. That's going to be, so we'll have new varieties of bent grass, fescue, bluegrass, etc. That will be better, better drought tolerance, pesticide, those types of things, using less of all of those types of things. So it'll be economically friendly to manage and maintain. And we already have we've already figured out a budget for that. And that's a very conscious sort of aspect of the project.
So what are you proposing to do with the redesign? What is the intention of that work, whether it's rerouting some holes or reshaping greens and hazards? What are you going for with the redesign of the course? How do you hope to improve it?
Do you mean it just with regards to the overall character of the golf course or
of the golf course? Yeah.
Okay.
Architecture, design.
Sure. So there's really good undulation on the property. So some of it very rolling, some of it lightly rolling. The key to all of that, I think, and some of the keys to the changes that we're making are trying to make better use of that and transition between those areas. So we're trying to get the flow of the property to better match that in the cadence of the players. And to me, that's where those key elements of how do you transition from one hole to the next and do that. If you've got a big hill and you have this beautiful hole that goes down the hill, well, ultimately you're probably going to be back to the top of that hill. So you don't want to go down and then go straight back up. That's sort of a waste of energy. You want to try and be able to use that. And yeah, you want to get to a peak, but you want to sort of absorb that and stay there for a little bit. And then you want to transition to another area or another level. And this is we have a sort of a high ridge in the middle and it peels off on both sides and to the north. So there's a fair amount of elevation there, and how we get about doing that involves a little bit of dirt work to be able to do that. There's a couple of extreme sort of situations in the routing now where we can do a little bit of earth moving. We can do that effectively, but it's in a smaller concentrated area, and we can make that transition work better. And that may not have been a focus of theirs, 60 years ago, or they didn't have the equipment to do that, or there wasn't the vision for that maybe. So we're trying to do that type of stuff. And I think that's the thing that's going to make the difference. The greens will have character to them. Most people know that I like a little bit of undulation in my greens and interest. So that's that'll be part of it. And not that their greens are horrible, but there's some of them that are very plain and they need some help. And so we're going to want to have that sort of be consistent and broad across the consistency and quality of the maintenance across that. So that's part of it, of redoing those types of things.
This episode of Designing Golf is brought to you by Mercedes-Benz. For more than 30 years, Mercedes-Benz has supported golf around the world, partnering with the most prestigious major championships, tournaments, and players in the professional game. Mercedes-Benz SUVs are the perfect companions for golf enthusiasts seeking performance, style, and space on the way to the course, and the GLS stands out as the pinnacle of this lineup. The GLS combines power and finesse, backed by 12 driver assist systems, nimble handling, cutting-edge AI technology, and superb craftsmanship. The GLS anticipates your needs, ensuring every journey is as strategic as a championship-winning game plan. The GLS reflects Mercedes-Benz's philosophy to deliver the world's greatest vehicles. The Mercedes-Benz GLS, even standing still, it's moving forward. Learn more about the GLS and Mercedes-Benz's full lineup of SUVs at mbusa.com. Again, that's mbusa.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. You're a very hands-on architect. You like shaping. You like being on equipment and shaping bunkers and greens features. How do you think about the style or the aesthetic appearance of those features on projects? Do you come in with an idea of, I want to do something with these that has a look, or do you just go there and respond to what's in the landscape purely?
Well, first of all, it's what I call reactionary architecture. So we're reacting to what that's giving us, versus having a static, nothing against Seth Rayner or C.B. McDonald, but they had a very stringent, organized way that they did things.
Right. Or Langford and Moreau, or, there's a number of architects who kind of have a style.
Yeah. And they were very rigid about that. So, and that there's nothing wrong with that. And they built great stuff. But I think the thing that's really interesting about golf is our palettes constantly changing. So what are those unique features and how can we pull those things out to give us something that's unique and special there that we don't have someplace else? So for the most part, yes, I'm trying to react to what's there, but I think you come in with an idea or a concept that could be, we're going to do big flashy bunkers, or in this case, we're doing, about 50 bunkers probably.
Which is relatively minimal compared to a lot of projects these days.
Yeah. But I'm thinking the scale of this, and that where there's a number of shared fairways and things also, the scale of some of these bunkers is going to be larger than normal, I think, than I would normally build. Like a lot of times you build clusters.
Just because the scale of the whole shared hole corridors is going to be big, so you need bunkers to compete with that.
I think so, yeah. And I think so in some cases there's going to be, some larger bunkers than say I would normally be apt to build.
I see.
And so the sheer number isn't the point. The point is, how do they fit in and how do they do that? And I've drawn in a number that have little islands and buttons in them and stuff. And that's that's sort of a throwback to what Mackenzie and Maxwell did at the University of Michigan and Crystal Downs, where I grew up and stuff. And there have been times when I have built little islands and bunkers and things like that. But I think there's an opportunity to make this feel really old school with some of that, and then kind of having where there's two greens sort of flanking each other and there's a large hazard in between with little islands in it and stuff. That effect is going to be really, really strong. So part of that's a visual thing. It's like, hey, they're setting up these holes both climb sort of, uphill a little bit. So you're going to get a little bit of there's trees behind them in the background, but you're going to get a bit of a skyline feel of those and this massive crater kind of between them. So I think there's things like that we're trying to do. But then as I'm building it, that stuff also evolves and we find other stuff, or we run into something that we didn't expect. And then you have to change and figure that out. And that's always something funky with old golf course properties. At Bloomfield Hills, not very far from Dunham Hills. It's an old Colt course, and there was a huge, basically cistern that was 6 or 7 feet wide. It was like an old boiler, 9 feet deep, and some farmer a long time ago, because nobody and the golf course knew this was there, and we were cutting some sod off, and they ran into this metal lid, and all of a sudden, we open up this lid, and there's water coming into this and a pipe leaving out that drained down into the fairway and connected into the main drainage of the deal. So some very practical person, hey, we've got this old boiler unit, let's throw this in there and make a big it's basically a huge catch basin, but it's all internal underground, and people are like, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, it's working. I'm not going to do it.
Wouldn't do it that way now, but hey, look at it.
It's perfect.
It seems to be doing
like,
fine.
That guy was smart, man. So you run, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. And there's a guy that was a maintenance guy there. He's, I didn't see him, but he'd been there back like 50, 60 years ago. He didn't even know that it was in the ground. So it's really old. Who knows what we're going to find under Dunham Hills? It might be something weird, but hopefully nothing too crazy. So,
that's the thing with golf courses that have been there for a while. Sometimes you find stuff good or bad that you're not expecting, if the course has been there for a while. That's interesting what you're saying about going in with a general idea of some new stuff that you want to do, these shared corridors and maybe some bigger bunkers with those little Perry Maxwell islands in them. He did like those. He did some of those at Prairie Dunes. He did some of them at Southern Hills, actually, that kind of have come back. Not all of them have come back. And so it's, is that how influence sometimes works with you? Do you think of particular architects and think, hey, I want to kind of pluck this and see if I can do something with that on this project?
Yeah, I think it's an evolution. I guess I'm not very often, like specifically trying to like focus in on, I think maybe clients have more of that. Like, hey, I want to have a 13th at Augusta, or
I like Fisher's Island. Look, can you give me something like that?
So do I. It's a great place.
Who doesn't?
So yeah, I think, a lot of times they're sort of looking for that type of stuff. Ben hasn't given me any sort of directive that way. He's kind of letting that do, and he's very interested. He's an architecture junkie. So I'm sure like once we get going, he's going to be like, hey, what about this? What about that? And that's all fine and dandy. It's just, it's trying to like bring everything together and have it be cohesive. And sometimes you go in with an idea or a hole and it just doesn't fit somehow. It doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or terrible. It just doesn't work out quite right. And so you have to adjust and you have to figure out a way to make things work. And that's a difficult thing to do, because once you're really like, wow, this is awesome. This would be so great. Well, if it doesn't work with the other 3 or 4 holes on either side of it, how do you get those to all come together? How do you get those to merge and to be really functional?
Yeah.
Because, if you have one great hole on a golf course and you have 17 marginal ones, it's not a very good course, even if it's the most spectacular hole in the world. So
got to make the puzzle pieces fit together. And whatever looks like a stylistic flourish is sometimes just a response to what's going on in other holes or
could be. Yeah.
needs that arise on a particular one as you're building it.
to a little bit further from that too, I think is, we're influenced by all of those guys, whether it's Mackenzie, Colt, McDonald, Donald Ross, Tillinghast, you're right down the line, Flynn, those things, or like the old links courses and the stuff that they have, all of that cumulatively helps you build things or do things. And I think that it doesn't have to be that direct. Just the influx of all of that type of stuff is really what is making a difference.
Having kind of a Rolodex of ideas that you've seen elsewhere, and maybe one pops up as you're constructing the course. Yeah, I've heard Brian Schneider and Blake Conant talk about that a lot when they're looking at a particular game. Oh, this reminds me of some obscure course that I saw, way up in the north of Scotland, and it's having that kind of memory is both impressive and it seems useful. So the club model, the kind of business model story here with Proving Ground and what you're doing in transforming Dunham Hills is really interesting. The idea is to replicate a kind of UK club model. And from your description of it, it sounds like this involves a kind of balance of public play, accessibility, but also a membership culture, combining those two. What, do I have that right? First of all, is there a better way to describe what the UK club model is for our audience? And if you could talk a little bit about what the benefits of this are.
I think you're describing it properly. And I think the thing is that the UK member clubs, even the more exclusive ones, they might have very limited times where it's accessible, where you can be introduced by your club pro, maybe you're traveling over there, et cetera, or, you have, charter groups and, golf tour groups and things like that, find access and ways to do this sort of stuff. So there's ways to do that, maybe at a premium though. And I think what that affords is it helps those clubs on their bottom line. So it maybe keeps their dues down a bit because they're having sort of a premium guest that comes in, and usually those people end up being fairly serious because they're paying more money and they're respectful of it and they're excited about it. So the idea with Dunham Hills new Proving Ground would be that as we build this membership and we get to 100, 200, 300 members or whatever, we get the opportunity to have less space available because maybe there's more demand by the membership. So certainly when there's only 100 members, there's many other tee slots available for public play. Now, that may still be restricted in certain times of the day, et cetera. So, if you're traveling through the area and you like, hey, I've heard a lot about this new golf course. Let's go try and play it. And you call up and, hey, I want to tee off at 9:30. Well, our tee offs are going to be at 11 o'clock that day because, our member play is that morning up to 11 o'clock or something. So that can change or be shifted around a bit, I think, depending on how many members they have and how they want to sort of control that environment. So it gives those members that kind of ability to have, feel like they're unencumbered, they're playing at a steady rate, they know the golf course, bing, 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 they play more rapidly and they don't feel pressure from Billy Bob and his guys drinking a bunch of beer. So nothing against drinking beer.
Nothing against Billy Bob,
Yeah, exactly.
Seems like a cool guy.
Billy Bob, have you seen that the Landman series? He's amazing in that. He does a great job. Billy Bob Thornton, he's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. So. It's a proud name.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. He's an incredible actor. So I think really it's to try and provide a sort of a balance between that and say, this becomes, wildly popular, and there's a massive list of people getting in, it may evolve into something else where it's going to be more restrictive. But I think the whole goal is that they would, Ben would like to have this be something where the public is available to play a cool golf course that's walkable, it's fun. They'll still have golf carts and things like that. But then it's also, and like I said, the women's coach and the men's coach at the Heartland High School, those two coaches are involved in this. They've been playing there for years. They're still going to do that. They're still supporting, say, youth golf and bringing in the regional, golf championship or whatever for, whatever this division is. So there's that activity of being involved in the community and doing that type of stuff. I think is, if people want to talk about growing the game, that's how you do it. That's really, positive.
In the U.S., clubs like this, we often refer to with the catch-all term semi-private, which is, as a term, it doesn't really make sense, but it does set apart these courses that function as clubs with memberships and dues and initiation fees, maybe even, but at the same time allow consistent, fairly easy public access where you can make a tee time. These models, these semi-private models, are structured in different ways, and I'm not sure I understand the nuances of every single different type of structure. But at Pasatiempo, for instance, that's a little different in my understanding because the memberships kind of function as shares, and you can sort of sell them, and there's that element to the club. But then you also have club cultures at places like Wild Horse Golf Club in Gothenburg, Nebraska, where that feels and really functions like a public course, an affordable public course most of the time. But there is a healthy club membership, an affordable membership that is drawn upon by many of the locals in that area. So I guess there are varieties of these clubs, but still relatively rare. You go to the UK and just about every single club it's rare to find a club that doesn't really allow outside play and doesn't use that outside play to fund its operations. So I wonder, do you have a theory of why these models are so rare in the US?
I don't. I think the US, has a different view of golf too. From a conditioning standpoint, everybody watches the Masters in April and like, hey, Frank, we got to go cut those bunker edges and make them look like a laser went through there and, sliced them down. And the Masters is awesome. I love the Masters. Since I was a kid watching with my grandfather, that's one of the reasons that, I got excited about golf. It was the beginning of the golf season here in the North. So that was super fun. But that's appropriate there. It's not necessarily applicable to all the other places. And so I think there's a difference in sort of the perception of golf in the U.S. that, there's a muni golf course that anybody can go play, and it's not in good condition. It takes forever to play, and drinking beer, and but if you go to the country club, it's cultured and has this. And there's a big variety in those in the U.S. too. There are places that are much more low key, and there are places that are just. You have that in the U.K. also. But I think the opportunity to do these sorts of things leads to something that's more, golf, like we were talking about before, is a very social game. And so there are places that you go into that do allow outside play. And you tend to find that they're like, hey, Garrett, welcome. Oh, where are you from? What do you like to play? What brought you here or something? You're sort of engaged. And a lot of times you go to the UK and like you get a caddy, and the caddy is the captain of the club or the president of the club, and right. He's just like, he's a farmer or something,
Yeah.
But, he's not farming anything that day. So he just wants to make a few extra bucks. And he also sort of serves as your guide, which is really interesting. And it leads to this sort of thing of sharing, and that golf courses in Scotland and Ireland and England are sort of a fabric of the community. They're not just wholly owned by those members. And I think that's maybe a difference between the Americas and stuff, where it's sort of like, well, we're the owners of this club, it's private. Private means, stay off, etc. I don't know. That could be part of it. But those are good examples that you gave. There's Belvedere here in northern Michigan and Charlevoix, which is
Belvedere's a great example.
Fantastic golf course.
Yeah.
And they have a fair amount of slots available, and depending on the time of year, but it's controlled too. So like if there are certain days where, that whole morning's blocked off because that's the normal member play for men's day or women's day or whatever. And Greywalls, Marquette Golf Club, they've got 36 holes, but Greywalls, of course, that I built for them 25 years ago, that's that has public play, but they have 650 or 700 members, and they're busy on both golf courses all the time. And the original golf course was Langford and Moreau, 9 holes of that. David Gill added another 9 to it in the 60s. So it's a place that is, they're welcoming people and bringing people in, and there's a huge different variety. And that's also, the UP is a different place. I mean, it's not that far away. Everyone thinks it's totally remote, but there's a lot of access to get in there.
This is the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for
correct
for people
for people that don't know
where Marquette Golf Club is. And I assume that most of those hundreds of members, at least a portion of that membership, lives elsewhere, right?
No, most of them are local. Most of them are there. So
Wow.
So Marquette's a good sized town.
Okay.
It's sort of the hub of the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah. Now I haven't been there. This is on my bucket list to go see Marquette and Greywalls.
It's a glaring omission. Come on.
I mean, obviously, I have many of those omissions in my my resume.
We all do. But it's the town's probably 20 to 25,000 people, but then there's a surrounding area to that too. And Northern Michigan University is there. There's the major hospital for a good section of the Upper Peninsula there. So you've got doctors, lawyers, college professors, you've got students, you have guys that work in the mine, you've got, insurance guys, you've got all, sort of this well-rounded breadth of people that are there, and they love being outdoors up there. And so they take advantage when it's gorgeous in the summer. If it's light out, they're playing golf. This time of year, they're putting golf carts away at 10:45 at night. I mean, they're playing right to dark, and it's Eastern time zone, far north and west. So it stays light really, really late this time of year.
It's pretty interesting that Michigan has quite a few, relative to other states, other areas, has quite a few examples of courses that have managed to balance club culture with public access. And it seems like many of these places are in some vacation spots, right? If you go closer to Detroit, the suburbs of Detroit, there are an awful lot of private clubs that are more exclusive. But you get farther north in Michigan, and you start encountering some of these places where, there's a club, but you can also figure out how to play the course fairly easily. And so there's something interesting there in the culture of Michigan golf that allows that to happen. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'd love to figure out in general what it will take for more courses to adopt this model. This is something I think a lot of American golfers hunger for, is not only a club to join that doesn't feel like an ultra exclusive or expensive club, but also an array of golf courses that, while they have their club thing, will also accept some outside play. And so I just wonder what it'll take for that to happen in American golf. I think there are some tax issues related to nonprofit status in the US that I don't entirely understand. But yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how more of these places can exist.
I think part of the issue is, or the result of that is there are a lot of clubs that are in a resort area.
Yeah.
And so they're smaller, a little more laid back towns. The membership might be really seasonal. They might be people that are only there, part of the year, snowbirds that go south or whatever. And then, there's the Midwest nice. People are sort of, they're a little bit more
Michigan's friendly. It is.
Yeah.
I've experienced
and the same thing happens in Wisconsin or Minnesota, which are big golfing states also. And they tend to have that same sort of cyclical, they got serious winter, and then, the summer comes, it's beautiful, and people are coming back. And so I think that might be part of it. That doesn't explain why, it can't be someplace else, because there's plenty of other friendly places in the country. But that I think that's maybe part of it. There are people that say, they haven't been around, and they've moved here. We have some new neighbors that just are coming in, this young couple, and they're like, and they've been in Chicago for a number of years and stuff. And Chicago's pretty nice, but it's a big city, so there's a lot of energy going on, and people are, they're tense, they're trying to get there, traffic's bad or whatever.
You don't always know your neighbor if you live in an apartment. But I've lived in an apartment buildings in Chicago and not really known my neighbors.
So, but I think that, they're like, everybody's so nice. They're like, you go down the street and everyone says hi and that sort of stuff. And that, I think that gets with that sort of smaller community, where you've got sort of a connection to people, or you see them at the school or the church or the drugstore or whatever, because that's where everybody has to go there, or, use that facility or something. So I think that's maybe part of it.
All right, let's talk real quick about Perfect Practice. Perfect Practice creates the highest quality putting mat for a realistic putting experience that I know of. I've been using it for the past several months, and I've seen real benefits in my own game. The mat is crafted with this unique crystal velvet material that ensures a smooth ball roll and a kind of precise ball movement that simulates the dynamics of real golf turf, except of course it's in the comfort of your own home. You can train anytime, anywhere. This is great for practice during the cold months. Right now we're in the middle of summer, but in a few months it's going to get a little bit colder. You won't be playing as much golf outside, and Perfect Practice offers a great way to kind of stay in shape with putting. It's fun and challenging for all skill levels, so you can kind of find your level with a Perfect Practice mat, a level of precision that kind of suits your game, whether you're a pro or an average player. It's easy to set up and put away. It has a convenient automatic ball return, and the training lines on the Perfect Practice mat give you kind of instant feedback about how the ball is coming off your putter. And that's really what you want out of a putting mat. You want that feedback. You want to know if the ball is doing what you think it's doing as it's coming off of your club. That's really the big thing that this mat offers. So all orders placed on perfectpractice.com will receive a free putting alignment mirror with purchase for a limited time. So make sure to check that out. But most importantly, you can use the code DESIGN for 20% off your putting mat. So go to perfectpractice.com and check that out. The code DESIGN is special for the podcast Designing Golf. If you want to support the podcast, that is the code to use. So again, perfectpractice.com, code DESIGN. All right, let's get back to the episode. Another element of this story, the Proving Ground story / Dunham Hills story, is about building golf that can be accessible, building on a responsible budget, building something that can be maintained efficiently. You have done this a lot in your career. I think actually the new build projects that you've done, a lot of them have been publicly accessible, affordable golf courses, especially in the state of Michigan. You did Kingsley Club, which is a private course, and we did actually a recent video with you that people should check out. I thought that turned out really well, and your contributions to it were great. But in addition to Kingsley Club, you have helped design Diamond Springs, the Mines, other courses in Michigan that were meant from the beginning to be affordable courses. I wonder what you think are some of the keys to designing for affordable golf, but still producing something really interesting and satisfying artistically.
Well, certainly what you begin with is always a big factor. So when you think about what your soil type is like, how is that's going to affect a lot of what you have to do to make things work. If you got solid clay and flat ground, you got to move a lot of dirt. That costs money just because it's equipment time, it's fuel, it's labor, all of that sort of stuff. And moving dirt, it just costs money. So
because you got to make it drain on flat clay sites. You got to figure out how to make it drain, and you need to move earth to make that happen.
You got to get water to the plant. That's irrigation. You got to get water away from the plant. That's drainage. Those are the first two critical things, that you have to do. And so if it's flat, hard pan, clay or whatever, you're going to have to do a lot of different stuff that's underground that no one really sees. Besides, this is a perfect Redan hole, or all the stuff, the strategy and the stylistic stuff you want to talk about. You've got to make it actually function and work. So in Michigan, because of the glaciers, we've had a lot of areas where there's good rolling, diverse terrain because the glaciers moved all this stuff, pulverized the sand and the stone down into like a very well-drained, nice sandy loam, sand, gravel, types of things that are very effective at moving stuff through the ground. But there's still enough fertility. You just go by any old farmstead in the Midwest, and there's a lot of plant growth there. So there's still a lot of good growing medium in that. And so we're starting with good product on all of those courses that you talked about. Pilgrims Run, same thing. You think about Greywalls. Now there's a lot of rock there. That's why it's called Greywalls. But there's also pure sand on that site. And even when there was a big rock outcropping, we could go over 50 feet and stick the dipper down and we're just pulling pure sand up. Now, I don't know why that is or how that worked there, but, that was one of the fortunate things about the site was we were able to utilize materials on site. We didn't have to import materials there. So that leads to a cost of, less earth moving. Now you've got fine shaping and things like that where you're doing detail. So bunkers, greens, tee work, or fixing, moving a little bit of dirt to make this whole other bigger area more functional. That's very economically effective. So you can move a little bit of dirt in one area and make 3 or 4 holes work instead of having to shape 3 or 4 holes continuously. That's good. That's the essence of a good routing, being able to find those types of things and make them function.
That's interesting. You're talking about basically not going hole by hole and shaping each hole into what you want it to be, but looking at the routing and looking at some of those gathering points or concentrations of activity and shaping that whole thing, moving, as you say, a little bit of earth to make all 3 or 4 of those holes work in one area.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a concentration or efficiency of sort of efforts, time and money, involved in that to make that work.
Do you take a different approach to shaping bunkers at a course that intends to be affordable than you would at another course, or do you not?
We don't shy away from doing anything if it's appropriate for the golf hole, it makes the golf better. I think that's important. And if that involves a little bit of detail that goes into that, we're very conscious of always building something that can be done with a larger machine, or how do you get this done or that. And part of that is having the superintendent or the future superintendent, the grow-in guy, like on site early in the process, because I will ask them questions, or they'll come up with stuff and say, hey, I don't know about maintaining that. I'm like, well, what are you using? Well, we're going to use a triplex there. Okay. Is it all-wheel drive or is it two-wheel drive? So we'll work through the process, because there are people that'll be like, well, I can't do that. Well, why is that? And maybe they haven't ever been exposed to it. There's a lot of extreme things, and that gets in, again, the experience at Crystal Downs. There, I had a direct drive thing, and the 10th tee falls off, and it's railroad ties holding it up. Like, doesn't seem real safe, right? Okay. So how are you managing that? Or there are ways to manage things, but how you do it, or how you approach that makes a big difference. And if there's guys that you have that are going to say, yeah, okay, I can do that. I got to figure out a way to do it. Or, I don't know about that. Okay, what do you think about this? And maybe we alter some stuff. So like when we were building Kingsley, the 17th hole was the big drop off after the landing area. And if you really bomb a drive, you go down the hill and you got a mid iron into the green or something, or short iron for some of the guys. But if you're back on the hill, it's a 3-wood or something, to try and get home in 2. And so there was this big valley, and it was all full forested trees there. And there was a gas line that ran through there. So there was a road, there was this track going through there. And I took Dan there, Dan Lucas, who built the golf course and grew it in and was the super there for almost 25 years. I took him there and I said, can you mow this? Meaning this big hill that we could see kind of under these full grown trees. And he says, you mean this fairway? And I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, because I got 3-wheel drive and for all the other crazy stuff you're building. So this will be no problem.
Might as well.
So, hey. But Dan had that sort of thing of like, okay, he was always trying to, problem solve. How do we do this or that? And there were things that he would say, hey, like, that's really hard for me to do. And I say, well, how hard? And there were things that, that we maybe tussled over here or there. But for the most part, we're trying to solve that and make that. And it's a very efficient golf course to maintain, actually, even though it's a big area, with the fescue grass and all that. And so, there's some compromises that you have to have there. Like the second green, there's very small margins for getting a triplex around there and trying to cut stuff. But I was like, that was really important. And we needed that space for play space and stuff too. And those margins of error. It's a short par 3, but we wanted it to be this demanding shot, and people make decisions. If you go to the back of the green, it's fat. If you go to the front of the green, it's really narrow. And, there's sharp drop-offs to bunkers or rough. And Dan's like, yeah, that's a real pain in the butt to maintain. And I'm like, yep. But that detail really makes a difference in that case. So that labor, that's extra labor there to do that, we could have made it blander and easier and stuff like that. It still would have been a really good hole, but it wouldn't have had that little extra, that's that extra 5%, those little detail things that you have to put into it. And then just recognizing that, hey, we've got to do a little bit more on that with the guys, and they have to understand that we've got to do that here. But over here, that's fine. We've got room all around it. Like, think about the third green, it's, you could land a plane on that green because there's all this room around it. So it's not, that's a different sort of thing. So there's a balance there. But at the very front of that, there's two small bunkers, one in the corner, and that's pretty tight. But there's room around it to do stuff. So I think that's important to work with those guys and to get their input and sometimes those guys are like, well, I'm not a designer. Don't ask me. I'm like, no, that's not the point. The point is how are you going to do this? And will you embrace what we're trying to do and understand what we're trying to do so that you can maintain that long term? I don't want it to be like I leave and they just do whatever they want to do. And
yeah,
right.
It happens
Right.
so much, right? If you don't make that connection with the superintendent.
It's a real team effort. And it's funny because at 7 Mile Beach, the superintendent there, Anthony Toohey, is his nickname. He's a really good golfer, and his family lineage are great golfers. His dad was one of the best Australian amateurs of all time, and his great grandfather and great uncle played in the British Open, in the 1890s and the 1900s. I mean, finished like fifth. And they were like, so he has some real great lineage. And I asked him a question there early in the project. He's like, I'm not an architect, don't. And I'm like, and he's a really good player. So, he understands golf, but he was just sort of focusing on other stuff. And I was like, no, I need to know how you want to do this, or, so we can find the way to do that. And, it's a team effort. We all got to work together.
Yeah. So I guess the key is the communication between the architect and the person who's going to maintain the architecture is where the efficiency comes from. And it's where the good architecture comes from ultimately, because otherwise it's not going to get preserved. And we see that at a lot of courses.
Yeah. And you can, grasslands evolve and they move, and that happens anywhere. It happens at the highest levels of clubs because you've got a different guy mowing greens, on different days, and they mow in a little bit different pattern, and they just trying not to scalp. It's wafer thin, but they're just trying not to scalp. And all of a sudden, if it's a 16th of an inch, in 2 weeks, you've almost moved an inch. And you don't really perceive that. You don't see that. But, over time, that green margin can move 1, 2, 3 feet, and over a decade, it can move 5, 10 feet. I mean, just because if someone's not paying attention to it. So, I think, great golf doesn't have to be expensive golf. And so thinking about the bunkers and, how do we build bunkers, back to your initial question, how do we build bunkers? Do we do that differently or whatever? Well, the bunker's a hazard. And so that bunker needs to do its job, in my opinion. It has to make you think and penalize you for your error. And that's usually an error in judgment, not necessarily an error in the swing. If you don't commit to something and say, hey, that I can't hit out of that bunker, or I have to hit a wedge or something, and then you shouldn't be playing that close to it unless you're really good and that you can take advantage or something by doing that, attacking that. So then you play over here and, well, it doesn't leave me the best next shot, so then you're trying to find the compromise the next time. And that's what's really engaging the golfer and making them think about it. And to me, that one really good hazard that maybe requires a certain amount of detail, or is something you have to maintain around like by hand, that, we can't just run a sidewinder around that because it's too severe or too extreme. Like, that's okay. I think that's where we want to compromise and say, hey, we needed to put a little bit more into that, because that element is really critical to the feel of the golf course or the strategy, but it doesn't really take that much time. And that's sort of worth it. To me, that's more worthwhile than walk mowing tees, because it has a nice, small, narrow stripe, and like I don't really care about that. That
right.
Okay, we're putting a peg in the ground anyway. Most of us are. So I'm not trying to like belittle tees. They're very important.
Yeah, you don't need them to be pristine, perfect
Yeah. But the tees are the first thing that a golfer sees.
Right.
And that's their first impression of the golf course when they step on the first tee usually. And if it's a really bad tee, or it's not tied in well, or it's beat up because it's too small, there's a negative connotation to that.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because my dad, he picked up golf later in life. He was a tennis player, and he ended up, loving golf, but he really struggled with it because he started when he was like 50. And we went out to play some, just like, okay, but just sort of average, public golf course and stuff. And he was like, oh, the tees are just terrible here. I'm like, you're putting a peg in the ground, Dad. What difference does it make? I was just like, don't worry about it. You're not hitting the grass and it's level enough. And he's like, well, it's kind of like, it just doesn't look clean. It's kind of his thing, and,
Yeah.
So that, that was the way
Common
that I
thoughts.
didn't really think about it. And he was obviously going to be real straight with me. He wasn't going to beat around the bush. Hey, what do you think about this? And blah, blah, blah. He was like, this is awful. Let's fix this. It's not my job here. Yeah. So.
Well, look at that little piece of the bunker we preserved. Be happy with that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Choose your battles. All right. Well, Mike, I think that's a good place to wrap up. Good luck with the Proving Ground project, potentially another great course in Michigan. So looking forward to seeing how that turns out. And thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Pleasure to talk to you. This episode of Designing Golf was produced by Will Balsam. If you'd like to support Designing Golf and Fried Egg Golf on another level, check out our membership, Fried Egg Golf Club. Go to thefriedegg.com/membership to see what it's all about. We're building a great community of avid golfers in there, and we'd really like you to join it. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back again soon with another episode.